Hey everybody, it's your girl Charlene with Soul Sisters Talk, and this is our first video podcast. Whoop, 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 whoop. And so I'm excited today to bring you guys a topic about a TV show. We are going to talk about today Married at First Sight. This is going to be a two-part show. Today, we're going to focus on how marriage is viewed in today's culture, and if we think that the social experiment of Married at First Sight represents any true value in marriage today. If you haven't seen the show, let me give you a little premise on what the show is about. So first of all, it airs on Lifetime TV on Wednesday nights, and pretty much there's a variety of counselors that are clinical psychologists, sexologists, sociologists, a pastor, a marriage counselor, a communication counselor, and a relationship counselor. And what they do is they evaluate these applicants, and they go through this process of these applicants talking about what they're looking for in a significant other. And from that information that they extract, they match them with a person based off that information that they believe off their values of love, family, finance, commitment, and then physical attraction. And they take this information and they pair them up with an individual based on that interview. And then the couple meets for the very first time at the altar on their wedding day. Okay, does that sound exciting? I don't know, but I love it. I love it. I love it. I watch it every week faithfully. And so I have two people joining me today to discuss this show. And we're going to just talk about our opinions and what we think about the show. And they're two of my favorite people. They mean so much to me. They are my brother and my sister. They're my big brother and my sister. And I actually selected them for a real reason. Oh, I got to show y'all my shirt. Let me see if I can show y'all my Soul Sisters podcast shirt. Okay, I just had to do that right quick. You like it? Yeah. Like and my Soul Sisters podcast cup. Don't play. She ready. She slept. So my brother, Anthony. I asked Anthony, hey, Anthony.
Hey, Charlene.
I asked Anthony to be on the show with me today. It'll sound interesting. He doesn't even watch the show, right? But I wanted him to come with a fresh perspective of the show. So I asked him to do a little crash course on the show. So he has done some homework. But what he does do is he is an ordained minister. And so he counsels couples prior to being married and then while they're married. And so he gets to talk to married people all the time, or people considering getting married, about what really couples go through in marriage. So he'll have a great perspective for us to talk about this real reality or social experience that we're going to go through. So thank you for joining us, Anthony.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And then my sister, Rachel. I asked her on the show for a couple of reasons, too. For one, she has watched the show from season 1, right, Rachel?
Yeah, that's right.
So she knows the show. And so her perspective will come from understanding how the show has evolved from season 1 all the way through season 10. And then the second reason is me and her talk about the show and dissect the show almost weekly, right?
That's right.
So I think it'll be really interesting for us to kind of talk about this show. And I want to just let you guys know, we're just not talking about fluff. We have all actually been married. We are married ourselves. I'm the youngest sibling, and I've been married, of course, the least amount of time, but a long time. I've been married 20 years. Yay! 20 years. My brother Anthony, he's the baby next to me. I always say that, right? He's been married 37 years. And then my sister Rachel, she's old. Older than Anthony, and she's been married 40 years. So we do come to you with a little bit of experience of the game called marriage, right, guys?
That's right. A little bit. Just a little bit.
Just a little bit, right?
A little bit.
90 years altogether.
Oh, yeah. And I'm glad he said that because he's our mathematician for the show, okay? So I'm going to ask you guys to just, speak freely and talk talk about the show. So Anthony, tell us a little bit, since you got a chance to do a crash course. What was your perspective on, first of all, when I called you and asked you to be on the show, what did you think about?
Well, always that marriage, when it comes to marriage, being married for the years that I've been married, and then also, as you spoke earlier about sitting down and counseling, especially millennials, younger generation, and discussing marriage with them. So I was very excited about the invitation to come and speak on this subject, because it's a very important subject to me. And it's an important subject to God also. And so it's something that I definitely wanted to share, be able to share with to your audience and to those who take on and listen to your podcast, because I do think that it's a very, very important subject matter. And then also, crash course. I would say that it was a crash course. Let me just say this. I am nowhere along the way as you and Rachel. I only had an opportunity to watch 2 or 3 shows, and which was really enough for me. But again, it is something new. It's an interesting perspective to watch and to see how people, especially when they've never dated before, just all of a sudden get married. So I thought that was very interesting.
Okay, good. Well, I talked to his wife earlier, guys, and look, she said she hooked now, so she gonna be watching the show, so he'll be watching it too. He just don't know that yet. And Rachel, what do you think of when I called you and asked you to be on the show?
Well, actually, I was pretty excited about it. Number one, because like you said, the two of us, we talk about this show all the time. And almost on a weekly basis, where we're, giving our feedback as to what happened on that particular episode, and, just looking at people and so forth and their reactions and their responses to different situations. So I too, like Anthony said, marriage is a sacred thing, and it's very important to the Lord, so it's nothing that we should take lightly, and it's something that's very, very serious. So I was excited to be able to come on and just kind of, just talk in general, just kind of give my little bit of an opinion about, how I feel, about certain issues and things. So, but yeah, so I'm really excited to be here. So I really am, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. So as I was doing research, what I realized was that Married at First Sight, of course, is not the only show like this. From my understanding, there are a ton of shows out there that kind of follow this concept. I was looking, and there's The Bachelor, right? The Bachelorette. There's 90 Day Fiance. There's Love is Blind, and I'm sure the list can just go on and on. I think, Rachel, you were sharing with me that there's other shows out there. And so what I think that tells me, I don't know what it tells you, but that people are looking for ways to connect and find love. Where back when we were coming up, it was organic. You met somebody at the grocery store, or, wherever you met at school and college, and you went the organic way. I think there used to be a show, Millionaire Matchmakers, where, you actually hire people to match you up. So this concept is actually very popular now, to have someone else step in and match you up. Why do you think that people are now going to this length of trying to use, I guess, non-organic methods of connecting with people? What do you think, Anthony? You got the dating sites, and now we have the TV shows. What do you think why this is so popular nowadays?
Well, I think it's because of the advancement in our society of technology. And whenever you have technological advances, what it does is it allows other avenues for people to meet.
Okay.
And so I think that's one of the things that you see. But, it's kind of humorous too, in the sense that there's nothing new under the sun. In other ethnicities and other cultures,
Yeah.
couples were put together by family members and by others. And so, again, there's a nuance to what you see today, with I guess with all of the professions involved in, especially the show that we are talking about, where you have all of these experts or professionals that look at the couples and they determine who should go with one another. So it's like I said, it's nothing really new. Back in the day, or in other cultures, or still in other cultures today, the parents actually go out and place couples together. So, yeah.
I'm so glad you said that, because that's in my notes to say that, historically, arranged relationships is like not really taboo. That is something that has happened, especially in other cultures. It's just not something that Americans have been used to. What's your feedback? Did you want to say something, Rachel?
No, I was disagreeing with Anthony, even as he started saying that, and I mean, we can actually go back to, some parts in scripture as well, when, wives were chosen and so forth. So it's nothing that's new, like both of you have said. So arranged marriage has been around for a long time, so it's not anything new. So I agree with both of you.
So I was looking up some statistics, right, about Married at First Sight. And so I wanted to share this with you guys. So the show's been airing since 2014, and it's been 34 couples on the show. Out of the 34 couples, 25 of the couples, Anthony, this is where your math will come in. So, I know his brain's already working. So out of the 34 couples, 25 of them remained married at decision day. So for those who don't watch the show, so they stay married for 8 weeks. Well, they go through this experiment, should I say, for 8 weeks. And during this 8 weeks, they go on a honeymoon, they move in together, and they start trying to live their life as a regular married couples. And because it's so fast paced, they go through, they have arguments, and they go through the challenges of what normal couples would go through, just really quicker and much more of a concise time. And then at the end of 8 weeks, they make a decision if they're going to stay married or get a divorce. And so 25 out of the 34 couples actually remained married on decision day at the end of 8 weeks. Now, so that's pretty good statistics, right? So at the end of 8 weeks,
that's 70%,
right?
Yeah.
So, but I ain't finished yet, so
yeah.
I was like, that's good, right?
Yeah,
that's good.
Week time, yeah, right.
Okay. However, out of that 25 couples, okay, as of today, 10 of them are still married. Okay, so 10 of those 25 are still married. So what's that, Anthony? What's that percentage?
About 29-30%.
Okay, so what I did, so I said, well, that's not too bad. Out of this experiment, that's what we got. So I went then and looked at the national statistics of just traditional organic marriage, or however, and it says as of 2012, 45% of marriages end in divorce. So when we look at this experiment and we look at traditional marriage, how is this weighed? How does this weigh? I don't know. I'm waiting on my mathematician over there. How does that weigh as far as the 10% of the 25, and then 45% of Americans who do it, if we're saying that just do it the regular way? What do you think, Anthony?
Well, you're getting a better percentage of those who do it the regular way. Yeah, because like I said, for we're looking at, it was only like 25% for the show. Then you said 45% for doing it the regular way.
So that means 55% of Americans stay married, 45% get divorced, right? But 10 couples got divorced out of 25. Out of the 25 that stayed married.
Mm-hmm. I think it was 10. Wasn't it 10 that stayed married?
That's what I said. 10 stayed married out of the 25.
Uh-huh. And what was the percentage for the regular way?
45% ended in divorce. So that meant 55% stayed married.
Right.
So then I think the married at first sight kind of, what, I don't know.
No, because you're 10 out of the 25 last, still married.
Mm-hmm.
That's 25%.
Mm-hmm.
From the show. That's 25%. So you got 55% in those who originally do it.
Yeah. So with that, one of the things I wanted to talk about that me and Rachel talk about with the show. So how the applicants are decided is how they're matched is they go through this intensive interview, right? And they talk about what their values are in a person, what they're looking for. And so the experts take what they say that they're looking for, and that's how they match them up. And that tends to be what the downfall is in most of the relationships. Could you say, Rachel? So they'll say, well, I want someone who's very sensitive and he talks to me, or he is this or that. And then sometimes they get them and they're like, well, he talked too much. He too sensitive. I need somebody to be stronger. I need him to be, it's the very opposite sometimes of what they say they want. So Dr. Cal's like, but now you said you wanted to talk to you. Now he talking to you. Say he talked too much. What is the problem?
I think it's just, I look at it as, number one, most people make a list. So when they're talking to these individuals and they're saying, what are you looking for in a mate? Mm-hmm. I think that's just common, natural. We all have a list, a standard list, if you will, for women. We're always saying, oh, he got to be 6 feet tall and he got to have a good job and this, that, and the other and blah, 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 blah. But I think that sometimes the expectation of what we're looking for might be more than what we thought about. So when you're talking about when they're matching these people and the two come together, and Pastor Cal said, well, you said you wanted someone who's sensitive. You said you wanted someone. Well, there's not a list where you can say, oh, he can't be too sensitive. He just has to be sensitive to what I want or what I want to do. He can't talk too much, but I want him to talk this amount, So I think all of these things together, I think it's just the individual, knowing that you cannot just pinpoint or put someone in a bubble such as that. I think that a lot of times the things that, personally for me, I think a lot of times the things that they're asking for are very superficial things, mm-hmm. Things that, are not realistic if you're really speaking about a relationship. Because I think that a lot of times you grow in relationships, from my perspective, I never thought that I would have a man who didn't talk a whole lot, and sometimes I wish he would talk more, but that's another whole subject because we can get into another conversation about that individual and who he is and how over the years, maybe he has adapted or he has come to a different place in time. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but I think sometimes it's what they're asking for is unrealistic. So,
all right. Anthony, what do you think?
Well, Rachel made some very good points. Let me say something about the nature of human beings. First and foremost, we're sinners.
Absolutely.
So I think what that says is that we have flaws. Mm-hmm. We can think we want something, but when we get what we want,
we think we want.
It's not really what we thought was good for us.
That's
and
good.
So I think that's just the nature of humankind.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think what happens, and I think this is what you brought me on the show for. I think what happens is if we don't have a good foundation of what marriage is and what the purpose of marriage is, then those guidelines that we have, they'll never get met because we're not using the proper standard for marriage. Because marriage is God's showcase of covenant keeping grace.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus said marriage is the doing of God. He says, in the beginning, God created male and female. And so when you look at it like that, I think what it does, it takes away the precedent for me, my. And so again, I think that's the way I would answer that.
I think that's good because I think one of the things that Rachel and I talked about, and both of you guys kind of alluded to it, is people's expectations about this versus reality and the superficial things. I think that one of the challenges in choosing a mate, and when we talked about why we're in this evolution of, I even think with divorce, I was looking up what the number one reason for divorce is. What would you guys say the number one reason for divorce is today? Just pick one thing. Just give me one thing, Rachel. Just one.
Well, just one.
Just one.
I would say communication.
Okay, Anthony?
Unfaithfulness.
Okay, so number one reason for divorce is communication, right? So, but communication would be the stem for many things. So communication would fall under being able to communicate about finances. It creates chaos, it creates tension, it creates, infidelity, because you can't conversate with each other. But most of that becomes because of selfishness, right? Because you become so intrigued with what it is that you want, that you're not focused on how to communicate and hear someone else. We all know that in marriage, Rachel brought this word up, in marriage is really about sacrifice, right? Mm-hmm. And it's really about, I think any true relationship that's worth having, even when Christ talks about is dying daily of yourself, right? Releasing something of yourself to have a relationship with him is like, okay, I got to let go of this. It is letting go of things that, okay, every morning I want this, but I can't do that every day because now it's just not about me every day. It's about somebody else. As we watch the show, one of the things that you see is how these people come into this relationship. I want someone else in my life, but I want to keep doing my life the way I've been doing my life with no changes. But I just want you to come and blend in with me. Right, Rachel? We kind of saw that with this last couple. Let me see. What was her name?
Taylor and Brandon.
Taylor, yes. Taylor and Brandon. Taylor, Anthony, you didn't watch season 10. Taylor was a social media person. She had like 10,000 followers on social media, right? Or more. And she was really popular on social media. Brandon was a little more timid. He was kind of quiet. He reminds me of you. He could, be in a room by himself and be fine.
Not the timid part, though.
He wasn't timid either. I mean, he had a voice, he could speak, but he didn't need to be center of attention, right? So when they got together, the biggest challenge was she was doing this all the time. And he was like, can you just be right here with me? And she's like, yeah, but I want the world to see us. Let the world see what we do. He's like, come on.
They woke up in the morning and she had the camera in his face.
Right, he woke up, he's sleeping and she videoing him sleeping, put it on TV, and he's like, whoa. So she couldn't digress to understand that. I understand that's who you are. But in order to have someone else in your life, you got to understand their comfortabilities, right? You got to be open enough when you walk into a relationship, even if you're not talking about marriage, a relationship, to say, maybe that's not the wisest thing to do. And so we talked about, how to, Anthony, when you counsel people, and Rachel, you too, your husband's a pastor. When you guys see people come into you, or you see struggles, since we talked about communication being the number one failure, in that incident I just gave you with, you had Taylor, she was so focused on herself and she didn't think what she was doing was wrong. It wasn't that what she was doing was wrong. You know what I'm saying? It was uncomfortable for her mate. How do people get out of themselves to get into a place so they really can be in a relationship with other people? I've done many podcasts with women, single women, and I did some with some millennials. And their struggle is they all want to be in relationships, but everybody has this ideal, you are to take me as I am, and I don't have to do anything but be who I am. And if you don't like that, and I understand that to a degree, but how do we get to a place where we truly can evolve enough to have other people in our lives to commit to relationships with?
Again, I think that you're asking with young couples.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that you have to sit down and you have to get them to begin to talk to each other. And
Mm-hmm.
the way that you do that, you have to pose different questions that would spark a conversation. Say, for instance, with a person like the young lady, where she's always, in social media and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you have to, as the male in that, is to say, hey, that's fine if that's where you want to do all the time. And I think it's important that you respect my feelings, that I might not want to be a part of that
Mm-hmm.
all of the time. I'm not trying to stop you from doing it, but it doesn't have to include, you got to respect my boundaries also,
right,
in that relationship. So I think it's about compromise. Relationships about compromise. It's not always about what you want, but it's about coming together, two people coming together and having understanding of some boundaries.
That's good.
Yeah. I agree with Anthony, and then also too, I agree with what he said when he said that you have to have a foundation of what marriage really is.
Mm-hmm.
And then the communication part. I think back on my own relationship with my husband. We met in college,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that we spent a great deal of time talking to one another, communicating with one another. And in that time, we talked about our dreams, our hopes, the things that we wanted, what we expected out of life, what a family would look like, what our children would even look like, So during that process of us talking, I think even that communication brought us closer together, to the point where, going back to the show, I think what happens is, in talking about Taylor and Brandon and the expectations and so forth, I think that they're put in a situation where the whole world is viewing their relationship, at that moment. And cameras are in their face 24 hours of the day. And so I think partly what they're doing is for the cameras, but then also trying to find a way to say, hey, because there's some people that are doing this experiment that are very serious about finding a mate. And let me go to another couple that was on season 10, Mika and Michael.
Yeah.
That couple, now Mika had some really good communication skills.
Too good.
She
Sometimes.
really wanted to sit down and talk with her mate. She says, hey, listen, I came on here to find a husband. I came on here, I'm serious about this thing. But he kept lying to her. You know, he kept using his past as an excuse to lie in the future or in the present, if you will. So I think that what happens with the communication is we have to find a way, like Anthony says, to come together and say, hey, it's okay that this is who you are, but still respect my boundaries over here. And then maybe at some point in time, you know, it'll be okay for me to take a selfie with you, you know, and let you post it on social media. But right now, that's not me. That's you.
Not when I wake up and I got sleep all in my eyes.
Exactly.
And that was exactly what his thought was.
In my mouth and sleep in my eyes. You
that
know.
was exactly
bad
his thought.
breath.
Yeah.
And, you know, with that example, I guess really what I want to dig to the crust of, guys, is how do we help people connect to acknowledging our own stuff? Because Rachel, as we watched that season, Taylor really struggled with accepting her stuff. Anthony, you may didn't get to see that, but she really struggled with understanding how she was wrong in that. So even though we're talking about characters, but we can really talk about people, right? Us as people, in our own relationships. And so you've had, I'm sure, experiences when you've counseled people, and you've had couples who come, and as human nature, when we do something, it sometimes can be really challenging. The Bible tells us it's hard for us to even notice the log sticking out of our eye, right? But we can see the speck in someone else's eye. What kind of tools can you advise us or help us with in building relationships to help us where we can start really doing some internal self-evaluations to help us so that we can work on getting to a place where we can self-evaluate to get into a good place in relationships?
Well, I think that that's very important. And so one of the tasks, or one of the things that I've shared with couples, young couples, when they're getting together, and like you said, a lot of times is to teach them and show them it's difficult for all of us to see our own flaws and to admit to them. Yeah. But what you have to do with one another is because you are going to be mates, because you are going to make this covenant together with one another, then there has to be some trust that's there. And that doesn't come immediately, but you can work through it, you can exercise through it by saying, hey, we have to be honest with each other about our flaws. And so what you have to do it as a couple, not just one person, but each person sharing, say for instance, evaluating their spouse, then their spouse evaluating them.
Yeah.
To say, these are some things, not to put you down, not to make you look bad, because see, this is why each one of you have to do it, because it's not one-sided.
Yeah, that's good.
It's not one-sided. And so what you have to be able to do is love and trust one another, grow into loving and trusting each other with your vulnerabilities.
That's so good.
And so but the way you exercise that is by instead of being upset with something that you don't like, having it already a part of your marriage growth, to say maybe once a month to sit down, write out. Don't you see, because what happens is when we get mad, if we blurt it right out, we haven't given any thought to it. So what I would admonish couples to do is write down those things that really, really bother you about your mate. but don't talk to them right when that happens. But each month, have a period where y'all sit down and you discuss those things that's on your list to say, hey, can you grow in this area? And then in turn, the next person does the same thing with you. And so I think that that's an exercise that becomes important in a relationship because it'll create communication also.
I like that. And Rachel, I wanted to talk about two couples, but I wanted to piggyback on the couple that you just talked about this season, Mika and Michael, with what we were just talking about. One of the things that I actually wish that Mika and Michael would have stayed together. I actually will say that. Yeah. Because I do think that Michael came to, at the end, what Anthony just said, that he had an opportunity towards the end to actually see his growth. And he started to admit, he started to see things that he had done in his past to survive. Sometimes people don't realize things that they've done and how they've hindered them to grow until they connect with the right person to bring that out, right? And I think because of Mika's personality, she did that. And she challenged Michael to think, and it hit him. He was like, you know what, I am doing these things. I do see how this has affected me. I do see that how creating this image of myself to make me feel good about myself because of my past has not been a good thing for me. I really need to work on that. And I actually saw when Mika said she wanted a divorce, the trauma, the devastation that went on in him because he truly wanted to be with her and wanted to be a better person. When he said she makes him a better, I truly believe that he could have become a better person because he would have had the opportunity, what Anthony just said, of someone highlighting to him and challenging him in that area. But I don't necessarily know that couples always give each other that opportunity. I've seen couples who, if they could get to that place where they would be willing to go through that rough time where they could talk about those things that challenge. People wake up and say, I'm just not happy. I don't like him doing it no more. I'm out. Or, or vice versa, I'm out. They don't want to work through that place anymore. Another couple I wanted to talk about was really challenging in the show. In season 6, Rachel, Jeff T and Shanice. This was another African-American couple, Anthony. And Jeff T and Shanice, cute couple. He had a lot of reservation when he got on the show. He was, I don't know if the word would be sheltered, but he was really, how would you describe him, Rachel?
Well, I think Jeffy came from a family where his mom had really set forth some moral value for him. So it was hard for him to come on the show to begin with because he felt like, is this something that I should be doing morally? Is it morally right or morally wrong? And then with Shanice, she was just carefree and just outgoing and happy.
And she had good morals. Don't get it wrong. She was not a morally.
No, I'm not saying, well, I mean, for example, on their wedding night,
she danced.
Yeah, she did a lap dance and he was embarrassed by it because it was in front of his mother and stuff, and so he was like,
what a striptease lap dance. I mean, come on, like when a man does get the garter belt.
She was just excited, But I think that the two of them, I think that they kept pushing each other.
Right.
I think that they kept challenging each other on what was going to. One thing I wanted to say what Anthony said, and I like that because I have found that I have had to do some of this in my own marriage. And my husband and I, one of the things that we started doing years ago was we started coming together and we sit down and we say this, not necessarily making a list, but saying, hey, you know what, Rachel, when you do this, this is how it makes me feel. Because sometimes we don't realize that some of the things that we're doing is causing someone else or is affecting them in a negative way.
Right.
And they're causing them to either shut down or, to behave in a certain way.
Absolutely.
And I think that sometimes if we're not aware of our actions toward another person, we continue to do those things unaware of how it's affecting someone else. So I think that if we can reach a point in our relationships where we can sit down and say, hey, the other day you did X, Y, and Z. And I just wanted to talk to you about it and just share with you how it made me feel.
Okay.
And
I like that. So, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So if I can paraphrase that, because I like to give the listeners kind of paraphrase. Basically, what you're saying is to be able to be vulnerable with each other and be open, right? To be vulnerable, transparent, and open, right? Would that be good for what you were saying, Anthony?
Yes.
To be transparent and vulnerable. Okay. So that's one tool. What about and so I guess that would include how to get to how would that also cover what we were talking about, expectations, when we're talking about how do we get to what our true core values are? Like, core values are what are your true beliefs? What do you really say that you stand on? Because we've seen that people okay, I'll just throw this out. People say I'm a believer. Mm-hmm. But their behavior is contrary to that action, right? Right. So how do people get in relationship with what they're looking for to be their true core values and what they want in a mate, and it mirror what they're actually going after? Could it be our presentation? Like we'll tell people, well, if you act like that, you're going to attract that. What kind of things can we help people who are listening think about when they're talking about, well, I always attract this kind of guy, or I always attract this kind of girl, but that's not really what I'm looking for. What kind of things can people do when they're thinking about lining their core values up with what they're actually getting in relationships?
Well, I think that first of all, you have to have your own foundation of core values.
Know what your core values are.
Yeah, I think you. But again, like I said, I've spoken to lots of young people and counseling them, and they haven't even established core values. And so that kind of talks to what you were saying, why I'm always getting this type of person, or I'm always in this type of relationship. It's because you haven't established any core values and what you're looking for and what you are, what you're really about. And so I kind of go back. I want to go back to the spiritual essence of it also, the godly essence of it also. I think that marriage is exponentially that much more difficult if the foundation of the marriage or relationship is not based on godly values. Like loving one another, like forbearance, being able to forgive, to forbear, being able to endure.
You better preach.
Being able to as a couple, being able as a couple to be able to just clearly put those things out. And so I think first and foremost, one of the things that I've given as homework for young couples is for them to think about that, to write down what their values are, because you'll be amazed to see that sometimes they'll have some similar, but a lot of them are different. Again, that's why communication becomes so important, because, I can recall when I was dating my wife and was about to get married, and, first thing I asked her, I said, do you want kids?
Yeah, exactly.
And look, the follow-up question to that was, will you discipline them? Right? Because look, there's no need for me having kids, and then you don't want me to discipline.
You want them to run amok.
Right. I mean, so those are values. Those are core values right there. Could you imagine just marry someone and they don't want no kids, and you really want kids?
Yeah.
So that's one of the homework assignments that I would assign young couples for each individual to write down their core values.
I think that's good. I think people really, I think one of the things that start any solid relationship is knowing who you are, really understanding who you are. I watched a show last night, and one thing it really made me, it saddened me. One of the girls on the show started crying very passionately, and she said she doesn't date. And the reason she doesn't date is because she's been hurt so many times by men. She's giving everything that she can to them. And in this process, she's losing who she is. She's been beaten. She's been cheated on. And she said, and then they'll cheat on me and come home and beat me as if it's my fault. She goes, and so what I had to do is stop, because I realized something's wrong with me if I keep allowing myself to get into this relationship. So I don't date. She goes, and then I cry when I watch my girlfriends around me constantly in these relationships. And she goes, and and we're sitting around here talking about men, and they're cheating on y'all, and y'all are worried about them, then y'all being mad at the other girls, that are cheating with your man. She goes, and I just realized I just need to figure out me before I get into any other relationship. And so I think that goes to show that one of the things that really needs to happen is just understanding who you are before you start entering into relationship behind relationship. Because if you don't, no matter, somebody can perfectly match you, right? Somebody can give you everything you say you want, but it still won't work if you don't understand who you are. Rachel, last night when we spoke, you said something that I thought was quite intriguing when we were talking about married at first sight. And we were talking about, do we believe this concept can work? Do we really believe in love at first sight? And you said, absolutely. So before you talk about it, I want to just throw this out. Anthony, I want you to think about this. Rachel, I want you to think about this, and I want you to talk about it, Rachel. Do we believe in love at first sight? So, Rachel, say what you were going to say.
Well, what I shared with you last night was what I thought was love was really lust at first sight. Okay? I'm just going to be honest with you. Because I did not, I fell in love with my husband when I met him, when I saw him, came home from college, told my mom, I have met the man I'm going to marry, the father of my children.
You've been married to him for 40, how many years?
Yeah, what's that?
You've been married to him for how many years, 40?
40 years. Now, keep in mind, at that time, I didn't know anything about him. So you asked the question, do I believe in love at first sight? I think that we can have that superficial ideal of what we think marriage or a marriage partner.
Well, not marriage, just love. Do you think you can see somebody, but ooh, I really have a feeling for that person at first sight?
Yeah, I think that you can have a strong feeling for that person. I do. I think that there's an attraction physically that may somehow attach itself emotionally, That's and good. What you think is, I think I can really fall in love with this person. I think I've fallen in love with this person.
Okay, hold that thought. Hold that thought. Anthony, do you think that you can have any type of love at first sight? Not saying that you gotta get married to a person, but just.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, I believe at first sight you can have a love for someone, but I can't marry nobody at first sight. I mean, like the show is. I mean, so I do, because again, remember, marriage is about God. God is involved in it. And so even though I might not have had the full concept of what loving that person is, I believe that God can put that twinkle in your eye for someone, that it would grow and develop into an enduring and an everlasting love.
And I agree with that. And let me just say this on top of that too. I think that when we talk about that, we have to be willing though too, because it's all about work and putting forth the work that we
That's what
need
I was
to
gonna
do,
say.
because it could possibly, because I have often said that I met my husband and I just knew that it was God who put him in that place at that time for me to see and for me to fall in love with him. And it wasn't, and so the first few years of marriage, okay, you reach a point in marriage where marriage becomes very hard, okay, because, well, for me, I don't know about the rest of the world, because maybe
For
there's
everybody, honey.
but it becomes hard. And so you have to mentally decide what you're going to do from that point on. Now, grant you, and I agree, Anthony, marriage is about God. And so what we had to do when we realized that was to give that marriage to God in order for him to be able to keep us for 40 years. Because in and of myself, I could continue to be selfish. I could continue to just, be non-communicable in the whole 9 yards. And that marriage could have fallen. I did want to say one thing though, when you were talking about young people, and the Bible says, how can two walk together except they be agreed? And I'm just thinking of that verse because for me, it encompasses life in general, okay? Any relationship that I have, it's gonna be hard for me to have a relationship if we are not in agreement or in alignment to some degree. And in a marriage, you get to that place, like Anthony said, that first question is, do you want children? How you plan to discipline that children? And that is the communication that needs to take place. Whether you married at the altar and is going through an 8-week experiment, the next day y'all should have got together and y'all should establish those core values. Here.
I agree, Rachel. And I wanted to say, I absolutely agree with what both of you guys have said. And one of the things that I can appreciate about the show that Pastor Cal says is exactly what I was getting excited about, is because, see, to me, marriage is a commitment. And marriage is not about a feeling. And are you committed to do the work? Because if it's only about, yes, I do believe that you can fall in love at first sight, but love is an emotion. So that emotion is going to change. I've definitely seen Reggie for the first time. He walked up to me when Reggie first met me, the first very day, well, maybe this first day he really talked to me. The first day he met me, he walked up to me and said, asked me a question, are you saved? And I looked at him like, and I said, yeah. He said, okay, I thought so, and walked away. The next time he came up to me, he walked up to me and he told me, he said, can I speak to you for a minute? He gave me a card and he told me on the back of it was Proverbs 31. He said, the Lord told me that you are my wife. Are you my wife? And I looked at him like, huh? At that moment, we began to talk and he said to me, listen, I already know what God showed me in you. I need to know, is that what you want? And are we going to be committed to figuring this out? Marriage is a commitment that you work on every day. Any relationship is a commitment because every day something happens to thwart the process or the plan. So you got to be in it for commitment, because emotions, I wake up one day, I ain't happy. Well, happiness ain't what your marriage is based on. It's based on the commitment and the covenant I made before Christ, right? To go through this journey and to depend on him to keep us together. And so I agree with you guys. So I just got really excited because Pastor Cal tells all the couples all the time, well, can you commit to going through the process and working it out?
And one other thing we talked about too in that, Charlene, is that commitment means sacrificing.
Yes.
Because you have to be willing to give up in order to commit. And I think I used this, with I was sharing this with you when we were talking about the married at first sight, and I was saying, when I received Christ as my Savior, I died to self and committed totally and fully to him. So from that point on, it wasn't about Rachel anymore. You know, it was about Christ. And the reason I say that is because when we first started talking about the couples, and we talked about Taylor, and it was all about Taylor.
Yeah.
And it's usually all about the individual.
Yeah.
And I think that at some point, these couples will need to figure out what kind of sacrifice am I willing to make in order for me to have a successful marriage or to have a successful relationship, regardless.
Yeah. And I think, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
And I think you're so right. And I think that was what we saw in, was it Austin and Jessica?
Yeah.
That they did exactly what Anthony proposed and what Anthony was saying, that you need to talk about these things. Immediately, the reason, they had an instant connection, right, when they met. And it wasn't a sexual connection. They just had this like quirky thing about themselves that just connected. But they started talking and they started having those kind of conversations. Maybe not as intense because you're just getting to know somebody, but they had some dialogue that started them to start to delve into each other and maybe your likes and dislikes. And so they started talking. And I think that serves to create strong relationships for anybody. And so as we're getting ready to close on this topic, our premise for the show was to talk about, do we think this experiment is something that has value in how the culture of marriage is changing? I guess I want to have some last thoughts. With all that we've said about marriage and how people need to, how we can work to figure this out, one of the things that I wanted to kind of regurgitate, we said, I think one of the big things that I heard you guys say is that in order for a marriage to truly be successful or any relationship is couples and people have to learn how to be transparent and vulnerable. You have to be willing to be open and expose yourself to the person that you say that you want to be with. You have to understand who you are. You have to know what your core values are, what you truly want in life for yourself and out of others. You have to learn love, forbearance, long suffering, and be able to give that, to have that sacrifice. Understanding expectations in life. So as I say that, what would you guys like to end this with? Do you think that, how do you feel about this experiment? And what do you think with the evolution of how people are meeting and dating that you would like to leave a thought with?
I would say this, like I said, I only probably watched 2 or 3 shows.
Right.
I don't know the full realm of it, but I do know the gravity of marriage.
Yes.
Because the word says, what God has joined together, let no man tear apart. Listen to that very carefully. What God, this is why I said in the beginning, God is in the midst of marriage. He is the doing of marriage. What God has put together, let no, and you know, and I know that may sound old-fashioned, and I know that may sound, you know, crazy, especially when you look at the show. I mean, you know, I watched the first show, you know, so again, as an experiment, I think it's a difficult experiment because the reason I say it's difficult is something that I would never do. First and foremost, no, I would no, really. Why? Why? Because again, I would never make a covenant relationship with someone that I did not know. Right? Because that's what marriage is.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're listening to what my thoughts are on the show. Thank you, host. And so it's a covenant relationship. I would have to know that person before I even stood before an audience and said, under God, that I agree to a covenant relationship. And so again, for me, just me personally from the outside looking in, I understand it's an experiment, and I understand that we do new and different things. But then I just look at it from a pragmatic and practical way too, is that, you know what the other thing it makes light of? Divorce. Because it's so easily to dissolve a marriage. I'm gonna leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your opinion.
It's been wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Well, I'm going to be short and brief, but I do piggyback off of what Anthony has said as well. I do believe that you can fall in love with a person, you know, at first sight or whatever. I do believe that. But I would have to say, at this point in my life where I am, and based on who I am and my covenant values and my core values and so forth, I would have to say that I would not enter a covenant of marriage with someone that I do not. I don't say that I have to know them fully, because I really believe it took me 20 years to really know my husband. But what I will say is that without counseling and really having the opportunity to sit with that individual, to get an idea, to see if we're on the same page, as you know, but I don't think that I have to fully know that person, because obviously I did not know my husband completely when I married him, because I think it was a whole, even though it was a year, and even in a year, I don't think that you really fully know a person and understand a person. And I think that happens with growth in that marriage, in that relationship. So.
Yes. Well, I agree with you both. I appreciate your opinion. To end this, I think that the experiment of Married to Medicine, Married at First Sight, along with all the other dating shows, show that there is a community of people who are searching for love and the hope of connecting with someone. And ultimately, as believers, we know that truly that connection starts with Christ. And so our prayer is always that Christ would be the center of the hope that they have when they're looking to connect with someone. I do believe that you never truly know someone. I don't think that I think time takes, and I think most people don't date long enough to really know someone. I've been with my husband 20 years and I'm still discovering who he is every day. So I'm not against the ideal of arranged relationships. I wish I could arrange my daughter just in case she's watching. I got a guy. But I have truly appreciated you guys sharing your opinions and your views on our show today. For all of you guys who are listening or watching our show, we ask that you would join us weekly on Soul Sisters Talk Podcast. We are on all your social media platforms. You can listen to us on iTunes, on Google, on Spotify, just about anywhere you can find us. And you can also follow us now on our YouTube podcast. So thank you so much. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you. Love you.
Thank you.
All right, we're out of here.
Woo! All right.